As Ukraine's counter-offensive continues in the northeast of the country, defending troops find more mass graves and destruction following the withdrawal of Russian troops. 1,200 people were arrested across Iran on Monday as demonstrators continue to denounce the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini.
NASA's DART spacecraft rams an asteroid at blistering speed. In a dress rehearsal for the day, a killer rock menaces Earth.
Yet more destruction in eastern Ukraine as Russia's military continues its assault. At least 4 people have been injured in a strike on a residential area in Kramatorsk. However, Ukrainian forces have regained thousands of square kilometres in the northeast as their counter-offensive continues. The key town of Kopensk, which Moscow used to resupply its forces deployed further south, has been recaptured. But a Russian-controlled strip on the banks of the Oskil River has blocked defending troops from advancing towards the Luhansk region. In his nightly address, President Vladimir Zelensky called Putin's partial mobilisation order an attempt to provide commanders with a constant stream of cannon fodder. He said despite the obvious senselessness of the war in Russia and the occupiers' lack of initiative, the commanders within the Russian military still drive them to their deaths. Constant attempts by Russia's offensive within the Donetsk region will surely be described in history as the murder of Russia's own soldiers. Officials in Kyiv are investigating a suspected mass burial site feared to hold scores of bodies outside of Kozacha-Lopan in the Kharkiv region, following the withdrawal of Russian troops. This comes as 2 new mass graves were found in the town of Izum on Monday. 400 bodies have already been exhumed from a forest in the area.
Cold and dark cells, evidence of torture, and a lot of disturbing questions. Underground prisons like this one discovered in the small town of Shevchenkov continue to appear in the areas liberated by the Ukrainian army in the Kharkiv region. Prosecutor's office investigates them with zeal in search of answers.
We found confirmed proof of torture taking place. Civilians were tortured here as well as Russian deserters.
What were they charged with?
They didn't want to collaborate with the Russian Federation.
Neither the number nor the fate of those who were imprisoned in these underground cells is clear. But there were some locals whom no one ever saw again.
A man driving in his car showed a Ukrainian flag to Russian troops. They stopped him and fired shots in the air. They got into the car with him and drove off. We don't know where he is now.
The successful counter-offensive launched by the Ukrainian army at the beginning of the month has shed light on what happened in the Kharkiv region while it was occupied by Russian troops. And not only underground prisons have been discovered. 10 days after finding hundreds of graves in a forest in Izium, the Ukrainian army came across an alleged mass grave with more than 100 bodies in a near town by the Russian border.
Dramatic scenes outside a school in central Russia as dozens of students run from the building where a gunman had opened fire, killing at least 17 people, including 11 children. Investigators say the man used 2 pistols and had a large supply of ammunition. One student who was evacuated from the building described how she hid under the school desk and sat quietly. She said everyone's legs were shaking. Russian authorities have identified the gunman who killed himself after the attack as a 34-year-old former graduate of the school. They said he was wearing a black T-shirt bearing Nazi symbols and was said to be registered as a patient at a psychiatric facility. No details about his motives have been released. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the attack as a terrorist incident and said President Vladimir Putin deeply mourned the deaths.
Demonstrators in Iran continue to decry the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died more than a week ago despite a backlash from state police. As students rallied for the release of a protester in Tehran on Monday, officials say more than 41 people have been killed in the clashes. But NGOs say at least 76 people, including 4 children, have been killed by state forces. This comes as 1,200 more protesters were arrested in major cities across the country on Monday. Iranians living in Istanbul also gathered in front of the Iranian consulate to protest against police violence and internet blackouts back home. This student says, "We resist to breathe. Please be our voice as a friendly country to us. Be our voice. There is no internet in Iran. There are more than 100 million hashtags for Masa Amini on Twitter." Moving west to Paris, riot police were seen using tear gas to push back demonstrators as they tried to march in the Iranian embassy on Sunday. Amini was detained in Tehran by the morality police for not wearing the hijab correctly. While police maintain she died of a heart attack, her family and eyewitnesses say she was beaten and that her body showed signs of torture.
This is the moment NASA's DART spaceship strikes the asteroid Dimorphos in a dress rehearsal for the day a killer rock menaces Earth.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
The spacecraft ploughed into the space rock at over 22,000 kilometres an hour. Scientists expect the impact to carve out a crater.
Oh, wow.
Planetary defense.
And most importantly, alter the asteroid's orbit.
Oh, fantastic.
Over the next 2 months, we're going to see more information from the investigation team on what period change did we actually make, because that's our number 2 goal. Number 1 was hit the asteroid, which we've done, but now number 2 is really measure and characterize how much ejecta we actually put out.
A satellite around a larger asteroid called Didymos, and DART will
So the impact was immediately obvious. It will be days or even weeks to determine how much the asteroid's path was changed.
The Swiss have voted by an extremely narrow margin in a referendum to raise the retirement age for women from 64 to 65. It's their first pension reform in 25 years. 50.6% of people voted for the measure. The left, trade unions and women's associations had rejected the increase, arguing that the state should focus first on equalising wage earnings between men and women.
It's above all a defeat for those women who work hard, have a small wage and cannot decide for themselves when to retire.
Much like in other Western nations, states are under stress as a bulge of baby boomers reach retirement age.
But at least we have succeeded in reforming pensions after 25 years and thus stabilising its finances. This step was really necessary and it allows us to cope with demographic change in the coming years.
In Switzerland, this is an emotive issue. Protest rallies have been held in some cities already, motivated by the pensions equalisation, but also by the gender wage gap, which stands at a very high 43%.
As Europe deals with its looming energy crisis, residents in Spain are turning towards a ray of sunshine to meet their electricity needs. In the past year, one company in Madrid says that requests to install solar panels has increased by 213%. The change comes 4 years after the country dropped its so-called sun tax on domestically produced solar energy.
We are reaching 200 installations in only 2 years. This is important. Well, this is the process we have followed, of joining forces, of joining work and of joining interests. Spain is now ranked behind the Netherlands and Germany as the country with the 3rd highest rate of electricity coming from solar energy. And some people claim that they are starting to feel the benefits of solar energy in their wallets.
My installation is 15 panels with a power of 5,500 watts, which is enough for my home and gives me enough to pay €0 on my bill, both in summer. Now, logically, there is an excess production, but this excess production is stored in a virtual battery.
We are experiencing a boom in self-consumption. In fact, the market is quite saturated, even until 2023, when we're scheduling our next installations because we do not have enough materials, and also installers and technicians.
And this increase is not limited to Spain alone. Solar energy is also booming in the bloc as a whole. Between May and August, 12% of its electricity came from solar power. That number was just 5.2% in 2020.